Good morning. Good morning, class, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Geography in My Backyard. Today, we will be discussing the basics of micro and macro geography, including mountain ranges and plate tectonics, all the way down to tiny mechanical erosion and weathering. Colorado is home to the Rocky Mountains and four national parks. Although it doesn't have the most national parks, it still has some of the most spectacular natural wonders in the world. Nowhere else in the United States do mountains of sand stand higher than in the Great Sand Dunes National Park. While Mesa Verde National Park is home to some of the most unique ancestral pueblo dwellings in the world, unfortunately, I didn't have a car, so I had to do my project on William F. Hayden Green Mountain Park. While less stunning than any of the aforementioned parks, it still had a lot to show and stunning views of beautiful landscapes. The first thing I noticed while hiking up the trail was the Rocky Mountains. They dominate the area and stretch for as far as the eye can see. The only place you can't see them is if you're looking at Denver itself, which is in the total opposite direction. And it's just really nice to see and really beautiful. The Rocky Mountains were formed when the Pacific plates began sliding under the North American plate, resulting in the subduction zone, in a small subduction zone, when the Pacific plate started to rise under the North American plate, it forced up against the bottom of the North American plate, causing the mountains to be created, forming mountain chains up and down western North America, stretching from British Columbia and Alberta, Canada, through all the way down to New Mexico. With the Rockies being so high in altitude, you can actually see permanent snow-capped mountains year-round because it's so cold at the top of the mountains that it just snows all the time, and it's pretty cool. Unfortunately, when I was there was no snow. There was nothing. It was just a mound of dirt, and I really wish I could have seen something more like this. This is what it was supposed to look like this time of year. That's what I wanted to see. That's what I wanted to show y'all. But unfortunately, I did not get so lucky. And if you don't pay attention and you don't look for the mountains, you'd probably never see them because they're just so far and they're mountains everywhere. If you wouldn't be able to tell, it's too far. And there was a lot of streams, ephemeral streams on the trail along the trail. The first time I noticed them was when I looked on Google Earth to find a location to film for class, but I noticed that there was streams there. So I zoomed in to check if they were ephemeral or if they flowed all the time, and they only flowed when it snows and melts or when it is heavy rain. So there's just ephemeral streams. They kind of tear up the landscape. Instead of being a traditional mesa, like how it looks in this picture, it from on top of it, it's so mountainous and hilly and steep that you can't even tell it's a mesa. Welcome back. Now, unfortunately, Green Mountain Park is one of the most unimpressive mesas I've ever seen. With all of the streams, it's not very flat and looks more mountainous and rugged than a normal mesa. However, it was close enough to the South Table Mountain, a local mesa, that I could see above it and see on top of it. Sadly, the camera doesn't do it justice. The southern Table Mountain is topped with igneous rock from the Paleocene lava flows, which is harder than the underlying sedimentary rock that have been eroding away for millions of years. There was another mesa or plateau in the distance, facing basically the opposite direction, but unfortunately, I couldn't find out the name of it or find it on Google Earth, so I didn't put it in here. Now, I expected to see a lot of mechanical weathering, like stuff like the rocks freezing and unfreezing and freezing and unfreezing due to all the snow and ice and rain and more ice. It gets there in Colorado and Denver, but I didn't really see a lot of it. I saw more bio erosion with these rocks in the far right hand corner. There's a little branch poking out. You can barely see it. It's looked like two or three strands. If you weren't looking for it, you probably wouldn't have noticed it, or I wouldn't have noticed it on the walk. But if you flip over the rock or move it a little bit, you could see further inside of it, and you could see that the little plant goes pretty deep inside the rock, and it's been tearing it up for probably a super long time. And the other rocks, you can just see the plants straight up crack them in half, and they've been growing around them, and they're still growing. And yeah, now those look cool. I thought they were cool, but they're not as nice to look at or as interesting for the class as this rock face right here. The rock face is so you can see all of the spots where the erosion has taken place, the bioerosion. You can see where the roots go into the rock and dirt and tear it apart, break it apart. And if you look on the bottom, you can see fine dust, not ground away, more like flaked away and flaked apart by the roots of the rocks, the roots of the plants into the rocks, and they just keep doing that for the whole plant's lifetime, and keep going deeper and tearing it further apart and apart. And stuff like that can also happen to the foundations of homes. They can experience damage from plants, so that's cool to know and to look out for. And the Colorado trip has been pretty amazing. I'm very glad that I could see the geological and geographical landscapes in person live in somewhere more interesting than San Antonio. Not because San Antonio is not interesting, but because seeing the macro geography of the mountain range while I'm learning about it in class is pretty neat. And thank you for watching. I appreciate it, and have a good evening.